Oh, we don't treat, oh, there we go, all right. I'd like to call to order the meeting this evening, November 1st, regular meeting of the Sacramento-Yolo Port Commission. And welcome, Commissioner. Would you like to lead us in the pledge? All right, the commission did not meet in closed session. Item number one is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within our jurisdiction. I don't have any slips to speak. Is anybody here to speak on anything that is not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, I'd move to the consent agenda. We have consideration of the approval of the October 4th regular meeting minutes. Looking for a motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion carries unanimously. Well, yes, right? That's why we can call that unanimously with those that are present here this evening. Moving on to the regular agenda, which is consideration of amendment to the port budget for fiscal year 17-18. Mr. Laurel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'll keep this one brief. This is following up on a request from the city, actually having to do with the port's debt to the city. So you'll recall back in 2011, the port actually borrowed $500,000 as an operating subsidy from the city's general fund. Followed up that later in 2012 with an additional loan of $1.6 million from the Community Investment Fund. So the issue tonight is only dealing with the $500,000 general fund portion. The city, in order to meet some of its budget challenges, requested to the port that the port consider accelerating a repayment of a portion of that debt. So the main points of tonight are, first of all, before the Port Commission considers that, we want to do a quick check-in on the budget. The short of it is the budget's in good shape. We're on projections for where we started the fiscal year, and the numbers are in your report. So the point there is the port can afford to prepay this portion of the loan out of its cash reserves. We have plenty of cash reserves, and it won't also affect the current fiscal year budget. We'll actually save a little bit of money if we make the repayment of that $500,000 going forward. I believe it reduces our principal payment for the next 20 years by about $40,000. So staff's recommendation is to go ahead and follow up on that request from the city to accelerate repayment of $500,000. It would be an amendment to the current fiscal year budget. And it would come out of our cash reserves, leaving a balance of about $1.85 million is the projected number at the end of the year. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Laurel. Are there any questions? All right, makes sense. Port's able to do it, and they can save some money in interest. So, all right. Looking for a motion? All right, we have a motion and a motion by Commissioner Orozco and second by Commissioner Hannison, right? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Item number item number 4, the consideration of the workshop technical analysis of the West Sacramento component of the Yolo Rail Realignment Project. Mr. Toft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I'm going to call up the PowerPoint here. Thank you. So a year ago, following completion of an economic impact study on the Yolo Rail Realignment Project, the Port Commission approved funding half of a study for additional technical analysis to advance the West Sacramento portion or phase of the project. So tonight is staff's initial presentation of the report, which was authored by HDR Engineering. City staff will make a subsequent presentation to the City Council in the context of the Pioneer Bluff Stone Lock Master Plan. Next slide, please. So the project would relocate the existing short line rail alignment in West Sacramento away from the riverfront to a direct route to the city's industrial districts near the port and to the port's north terminal. The current alignment, which is shown in this map, was established in the early 1960s during the construction of the port, and at that time a minor modification was made to the longstanding alignment along the Sacramento River, which served the riverfront industries. So I'm going to take a moment here to just Your screens probably show this better, but in red, you will see the port-owned track, which was created during construction of the port via 1962 agreement. So at that time, freight rail was removed from the Tower Bridge, and a new connection was made to the main line here, which the port still owns. It's known as the Washington Transfer. And a bridge was created effectively to the new industrial area and district around the port. And the port today still owns the red portions of the track. The rest of the track in yellow is owned by Union Pacific Railroad. And as you know, these spurs were already relocated out of the bridge district. So today, this alignment is a constraint to both rail-served industries in and around the port and to riverfront redevelopment. The ports has both goods movement and real estate interests, both of which would benefit from the relocation project. Next slide. So the HDR study confirms the feasibility of a new short line connection to the main line on the west side of the city and advances design of a preferred alignment to 15% engineering. So this map shows the 6 alignment alternatives that were analyzed by HDR. The green line was selected as the preferred alternative, and this was determined to be physically, technically, and operationally feasible. And the project, this is what is known currently as the Thule levee. The project would essentially convert that Thule levee to a railroad right-of-way and shave it down to grade, come underneath the freeway here, and tie into existing track along the Yolo bypass levee. Would require modification of the Thule levee, obviously, and to restore the flood protection features of that levee. Obviously, we have to go under the freeway, modify the levee, as I said. So the action really, this is the hairy part of the project, and the good news is that there's some co-construction opportunities. Caltrans, who is presenting to the City Council later tonight, no, they've deferred their presentation? Okay. Some point in the future, Caltrans will address the council with their plans to do an HOV and bike lane project. We've met with them and shared the study with them already. So exploring some possibilities with Caltrans there, and as well as the lower Elkhorn levee setback project, which to the north presents some possible co-construction opportunities with this project. Next slide. So the cost estimate for the project is $62 million. So how are we going to pay for that? The study outlines a funding concept which contemplates a new CFD and use of the city's EIFD as the building blocks of a local funding contribution. And a little bit about that, we see the CFD as the quickest route to bond proceeds, with the EIFD kicking in a little bit later, either as supplemental funding or perhaps reimbursement funding. We have the EIFD guru here, Mr. Laurel, tonight, who can provide any further details on what we're thinking about with the EIFD. But these property-based revenues would be supplemented by a rail fee, which the port currently collects via its operating agreement with both Union Pacific Railroad and Sierra Northern Railroad. Those agreements generate between $200,000 and $400,000 a year currently. So I want to temper your expectations there. I don't see, staff doesn't see a lot of potential for growing that. I mean, our rail volumes have declined over the years to a base level. So going forward, we have some notions which we'll explore as part of the the financing plan that we'll talk about here in just a minute. But the point is that don't expect a lot of growth in that rail revenue piece. The one project we would want to further explore with the Port Commission is the Sac-Port fuel terminal project, which creates some possibility for ethanol by rail and introduces our pipeline agreements, which we'll likely be talking to you about in the future as well. So these, the fees, the port fees and the property-based fees would be leveraged to go after targeted grant programs. And the HCR has identified Tiger Infra and Creasy as potential programs for which this project would be competitive. Next slide, please. So we want to talk a little bit more about the CFD. There's a pretty robust analysis in the Chapter 7, I believe, in the HDR report that really gets into the CFD. This map shows you the different districts that are being contemplated. And we're particularly interested in the Commission's comments tonight on a potential new CFD. The CFD could include both public and private property, public property being primarily the ports, North Terminal, Seaway, Stone Lock, and the port would potentially be the largest property owner in the district. We'd want to be careful about the rate of a CFD we'd be assessing ourselves essentially, which could work. We could link that to the rail fee, which I just mentioned as a reimbursement mechanism, but we want to preserve debt capacity on those properties for likely future infrastructure that will be required to develop those properties. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll wrap it up. The recommendations, the next steps here are, in fact, the recommendations in the staff report. So we are recommending continued participation with the Yolo Regional Rail Partnership, including the cities of Davis, Woodland, and Yolo County. Formally engaging with Union Pacific Railroad to secure their approval for the project, coordinating with the city to really develop the financing plan and kind of flesh out that CFD concept. And finally, kind of the hard recommendation financially for the port would be to create, to take those $200,000 to $400,000 rail fee revenues that today are just going into our operating fund, separate them out into a capital fund for future use related to this project. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Rick. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple. First of all, I'm totally supportive of this. I'm glad to see this is finally coming to fruition after so many years of pie in the sky. It looks like it's really there's a lot of work you all have done, and people at the county and the railroad folks. The $62 million price tag, is that based on the worst case alternative, the most expensive, or is that the most optimistic cost?
It includes a 30% contingency, so I think it's a reasonably conservative estimate. I think the report gives a range of 20% on the low side, and that would be the high side, including a 30% contingency.
Okay. And you were saying that the rail is declining. Is that because of the existing infrastructure, or is it just the market in general of using rail for transportation?
I think it's the latter. The existing infrastructure does have a weight restriction on right over here on West Capitol Avenue. The overpass has a weight limit, which effectively reduces rail car capacity by about 10%. So that is perhaps creates an economic disincentive to move by rail. CEMEX would be probably the shipper that's most impacted by that weight restriction. But I would say in general, the rail economy is And the port, for example, used to do about 2,000 cars a year. We don't currently generate any rail-based cargoes. NorCal Beverage used to ship by rail. Capital Coors, Farmers Rice used to do a lot more rail than they do today. So I think it's the trend has been down to a level that we see today with 9 shippers versus 20 shippers in the past.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have, if their infrastructure does make more sense to improve rail traffic, then could be an economic opportunity there as well. And the last question, on the CFD creations, you had Pioneer Bluff in there. And so how do you get to the nexus on this track? I mean, once it's moved out of there, the track is no longer there, and what is the connection then with Pioneer Bluff playing this CFD for a track that's no longer there?
Right, so the property owners in Pioneer Bluff would realize the redevelopment potential that is currently not possible because of the rail constraint. It opens up frontage on Jefferson Avenue. It widens. That's a 100-foot rail corridor along Jefferson. So you can see how narrow Pioneer Bluff is. So it really, city staff have identified rail relocation as the priority for moving Pioneer Bluff forward. So it's extremely important to Pioneer Bluff.
And Rick, if I can make one more point, the reason the Bridge District is not in the CFD model here, we actually have done this in the Bridge District. We had a CFD specifically to move the Cemex lead that ran along the riverfront. So it's a very similar situation. The Bridge District, because it has those CFD loads already in, it would run up against a limit and we wouldn't have the ability to include it, but the reasons for including Pioneer Bluff and the benefits it would derive are very similar to the Bridge District CFD.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to Rick. I mean, there's a huge amount of work that's gone into getting this far. Some luck and a lot of coordination, a lot of expertise, and I know playing with a variety of alternatives. And we have been looking at this pretty much since the city incorporated. This has been a key priority. I was at a summit meeting last week, and there were some performance indicators handed out for each city. And one of them that struck me for us here in West Sacramento was the air quality, sort of carcinogen air impacts by census block in the city. And for whatever reason, my intuition was, and I thought this from our earlier EIR work, was that our principal air quality impacts from our industrial legacy were principally on the west side of the city. But that wasn't the finding on the map. The map showed that the State Streets neighborhood, the area immediately proximate to the South River Road industrial area, actually has the most severe air quality impacts in the whole city. And so this is, in addition to all the economic reasons, the reasons why the port might be ought to have an interest in this, in the topic, the public health implications of having large populations directly nestled up against a significant center of rail and trucking and fuel operations is not trivial. And so that's why, it's one of the reasons why the original general plan outlined this strategy. Now, I was on council in 2003 when, as our chairman was, when the rail impact fee issue was taken up. And I think as you point out, we had a rail impact fee in part to finance this exact overall strategy, not this exact plan for sure, but finance this strategy. And at the time, those same property owners said, well, this is pie in the sky. It's never going to happen. This area we're never going to remove rail or deindustrialize this area. And so you don't do this fee. And we agreed as a council. Within 2 years, we were now moving to remove to do exactly what was said was impossible. Except now we were doing it entirely with the public's money in redevelopment, with no contribution from impact fees whatsoever. And then, as you've noted here, that process proceeded through the Bridge District with the realignment of Cemex and here we are today. So there's a long history here in terms of its impacts and the relative contributions of the the public sector and the private sector. And other than the port itself, and CEMEX as an individual company, the private sector contributions have been limited in part because of this statement that it will never happen. And so I really appreciate the work the city manager and Mr. Laurel have done, but especially you, Rick, for just staying on this and looking at every possible approach. And then our chairman has been convening at his office a broad-based group of folks from each of the cities and the county, and importantly, Union Pacific, along the way to try to collaborate and line up what our approaches and strategies and alternatives might be. And that's also reflected in this. I know Union Pacific has had a chance to take a look at some of these initial findings and recommendations as well. So a huge, this is just taking a lot of people to get to this stage. This is not we're not ready to start turning dirt tomorrow, but we're way more ready than we have ever been before. And I think it really is a testament to the seriousness and the comprehensiveness in which this has been undertaken. So I'm supportive of the overall approach and the strategy, and the financing seems appropriately complicated, but the only way to accomplish something that would otherwise be impossible. It will depend on a lot of federal support. I mean, we know that, but most anything important that we've done has, and we have been able to make that happen. So the only question I have about the map that you have up on the screen is just to explain why the Bridge District wasn't in this, but in the Washington. No, if you just left that, I'm sorry, it was the CFD map that you had up, the one that one. So the area between the portion of the Grand Gateway, I guess. So it gets to the east of the port-owned rail line spur, that area. So why is that? It seems like the development impacts that you described for the South River Road section, just as an example, also have some implications there. Wouldn't that spur be removed in this?
It would.
Location?
So the Washington Transfer spur would be removed. The CFD, being a property-based concept, excludes residential properties to create a one vote per acre type of a district, instead of, I think the law is if there are more than 12 property owners in a district, then then it goes to a vote of the residents as well. So I think we've only included vacant properties in the Washington district. And of course, this is what we call the Iron Triangle. These are all industrial properties.
Okay, so there are no other, so like I thought there was a mobile home park, for example, on Fifth that maybe it's still in operation, but it's on the market, and so
Yes.
Operation anymore.
It is not in operation?
That's correct.
So is that in the red here or not?
It is.
It is,
That's
okay.
the one we call the Jensen property.
Gotcha, okay.
The square there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Ricky, you identified kind of the next steps in the staff report. It's got a few more next steps, and it's got the estimated 26-month pre-construction time period. I'm just trying to understand. So the 5 next steps recommended by HDR, what's the timeline for those?
Well, so we're recommending that we focus on the development of the financing plan. Their timeframe for all the pre-construction activities was estimated at 26 months. But we're not recommending moving into additional engineering or environmental at this point. We want to figure out how we're going to pay for it before we commit those resources. So we haven't laid out a time frame for developing that financing concept, but I think it'll be a priority of the port and the city's economic development department in 2018.
Yeah, and just to add to that, what we're doing in our department is really looking at a broader strategy for the city's overall investments, and that's speaking from the city now, and seeing how those different investments line up in terms of priority. So that's something that we revisit with the city council, but this study and the work we've been doing around this in Pioneer Bluff has really sort of crystallized that this project just keeps coming up over and over in terms of realizing different benefits. So we plan to do some policy work with the city council around that topic, and then, like Rick said, we're going to focus on the financing plan as the key next step.
Okay, and your timeline for a draft framework for a financing plan? What are you looking at?
June of 18?
I think we want, yeah, I think that, I was going to say about 6 months, and the reason I say that is because the next key milestone would be the next infra grant cycle. So the current cycle's out now, then it's every 2 years. We want to be more than ready by the time this rolls around again, because we think that's the linchpin for the federal dollars, if we can make this project happen.
Got it. And that'll be brought in tandem with the update of the port's overall budget? Is that the plan, or is that going to be an independent, kind of moving on a parallel track, or how are the two going to be brought forward?
Well, so we'll have to take, when we're kind of laying out the CFD in particular, take a look at what the rate might be and the assessment burden on port property, and kind of look at that in conjunction with the rail fee revenue that we currently receive, and see what our budget capacity is. So, yeah, I think there will be a parallel, analysis of the capacity of the port's budget. But we're comfortable recommending today just to carve off that $200,000 to $400,000 separately. And we could go beyond that, but we're not prepared to recommend that just yet.
All right. Good work. Yeah, it's a long time coming, I think, for many of us who've been around long enough to have had the aspirations of this opportunity, and it seemed like it was withering away for quite some time, and now here we are. All right.
I move the recommended action.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Camalden, second by
Second. Commissioner
Commissioner Orozco. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Rick. Good work, Aaron. All right, that's item 4. Item 5, under General Administration Commission reports. Any reports from any of the commissioners? Going once, twice, gone. Port CEO report.
Well, not as exciting as West Side Rail relocation, but I do have a couple notes that Rick prepared for me today. Bob Carrs, retired in Newton, has been working on some lighting at the port. So there was a small project at the main entrance, so that's LED lighting, so it's much, much brighter today. And then Bob is pursuing a larger lighting project at the port, which would be also LED. We'll come back with the details and approval of that. And then, as we've mentioned a couple times in the past few months, the Boating and Waterways grant-funded program to clean up the turning basin starts in 2 weeks, and that will be almost the final phase. One more round of funding would probably finish that project, but you'll see contractors out there at the week of November 13th.
Perfect.
Again, to the credit of
Yep.
our port manager.
Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. All right, if no other comments or questions, we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.